and welcome to How to Hire and Fire Your Employer. My name is April Sides. I am a developer at Lullabot. I'm also the lead organizer of Drupal Camp Asheville, which is July 12th through 14th this year. And no, I'm not looking to fire my employer. A little bit about my background. I have experience in higher education, government, and agency work. I've taken several leaps in my career. The first one was the hardest, but I've learned a lot in 13 years of full-time employment. Each leap has contributed to my growth personally and professionally, and the journey has led me to being here in front of you today. So why do I care about this topic, and why should you? Based on results from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics American Time Use Survey, we spend 34% of our awake time at work. It's the number one activity after sleep and personal care. So that means we spend over a third of our awake time in work and work-related activities. So as Drake says, YOLO, you only live once, life is too short to be unhappy at work. So today we're going to talk about what do you want, what do you have, want, and need? Should I stay or should I go? How do you find the right employer? And how do you fire your current employer? So we'll start with what do you have, want, and need? This involves personal reflection and introspection. You have to know yourself and what you want and need to know what you're looking for. It's important to be honest with yourself. There's no right or wrong answers throughout this process. So we'll start with your assets. You have both soft and hard assets. Soft assets include your knowledge, skills, strength, and network. These are the things that you have that you can contribute to an organization. They may be listed on your resume or included in a cover letter, and they help to determine your market value. So consider things like what happens at your organization when you're not at work. What do people frequently compliment you on? To get an outside perspective, ask your trusted contacts. What do you see are my greatest strengths? If you had to come to me for help or advice on a topic, what would it be? Your hard assets are going to include your cash, investments, and possessions in relation to your financial obligations. So these help in risk assessment and salary negotiation. Can you afford a lower salary for better benefits? And if an opportunity doesn't work out, can you pay the bills before your next job? Next, let's think about your personal values. Knowing your personal values will help you make better career decisions. And also finding an employer and job that closely match your personal values can lead to better job satisfaction. If you've never realized your values in a formal list, they're still present, just unconsciously. That's because values are found in the decisions you've made in your past. So this activity is more successful if you do it with a friend to get an outside perspective. But think about the big transformative moments of your life. With your friend's help, find what values were present in those stories. Then name 5 of those values that you can't live without. Those will be your personal values. This is similar to something called a mountains and valleys exercise, where you think about the high and low events or moments in your past. If an organization wants to learn about your values to determine if you're a good fit, they may ask you to name someone you admire and why. So now let's think about your aspirations or goals. Aspirations are shaped by your actions and your experiences. So in your personal life, what do you do when you have nothing urgent to do? And will someone pay you to follow your passions? Also think about things that will complement your soft assets and past experience so that you can build on your past and continue to grow. So it's also important to think about your growth trajectory. There are 2 types of growth trajectory, steep and gradual. Steep growth trajectory is characterized by being a change agent, being very ambitious at work, and seeking new opportunities. Gradual growth trajectory is characterized by being a force for stability, maybe being ambitious outside of work, or just simply content in life, and being happy in your current role. But note that both of these are on the side of excellent performance. One is no better or worse than the other. But just remember, it's not sustainable to be both ambitious at work and outside of work. I like this quote from the book Radical Candor. We all have periods in our lives when our professional growth speeds up or slows down. Allow yourself and your peers the freedom to change. So lastly, let's talk about your work environment needs. Think about these as a spectrum or a slider. Think about what's going to work best for you. So in terms of place, in-person versus remote. How much in-person interactions do you require? If you decide to try remote, what will your workspace look like? Also consider size, a large versus small. A large organization typically has more hierarchy, which means they may have more growth and change opportunities. They may also be very process-oriented. If a small organization is owned by another organization, it may operate more like a large organization. And values can be widely different based on the size of an organization. Think about structure, formal versus informal. What do you need to be productive? Do you prefer or need structured or flexible work hours, workspace and tools, or dress code, things like that? Also consider the pace of an organization's work, slow versus fast. Sometimes slow can be boring, and sometimes fast can lead to burnout. There are cases where the pace will vary from time to time based on project deadlines, but what pace is going to work best for you? And also think about distraction, low versus high. What office environment is going to work best for you? Will you thrive in offices or cubicles or open spaces? And what level of interruption are you comfortable with? This applies both to in-person and remote. Work culture often dictates how available you should be at any given time. So think about what's going to work best for you. And lastly, let's think about travel. There could be no travel, there could be lots of travel. And travel can include retreats, conferences, client meetings, trainings. What amount of travel is going to be comfortable for you? So your assets, values, aspirations, growth trajectory, and work environment needs will evolve over time. Reflect often. If you're familiar with agile software development, think of this as an iterate and grow process for yourself and your career. So, how do you decide when you need to leave an organization? First, evaluate your current job. Are you surviving or thriving? Do you have work-life balance? Does your job align with your current aspirations and growth trajectory? Are you experiencing burnout? So I want to take a moment to talk about burnout. There are 3 kinds of burnout. Overload burnout is characterized by working hard but risking health to pursue your ambitions. Under-challenge burnout is characterized by being bored, having a lack of learning and growth opportunities, and feeling disengaged from work. And neglect burnout is characterized by feeling helpless and incompetent, you can't keep up, and you're feeling unmotivated. So these are the symptoms, or these are the signs of burnout. Physical symptoms such as exhaustion most of the time, headaches and muscle aches, getting sick often, a negative attitude about work or your career, feeling like everything is overwhelming or your efforts are futile, neglecting your old needs as if you're a pushover, withdrawing from new responsibilities, challenges, and people, procrastinating, mainly avoiding work or work taking longer because you can't concentrate, short-tempered, especially with colleagues, difficulty sticking to regular self-care like exercise and eating well, and loss of motivation and optimism. You may not know you have burnout until you hit a wall. Self-care is very important. Also think about these in relation to a friend, a coworker, employee, or boss. Adopt the radical candor motto and care personally and challenge directly. So now let's evaluate your employer. After your personal reflection, are your values aligned? Do you respect the leadership? How do you feel about the organization's direction and future? Do you feel appreciated and supported? Are there opportunities for career growth? How is the employee feedback received? As in, do you see results? Are there problem patterns? How are they managed? And are they tolerable or intolerable? How does it feel? Be honest with yourself. So if you'd like to consider, if you like your current employer, you don't have to fire them. Consider exploring other options or opportunities within the same organization. If that's not an option, use your current job and organization as a reference to compare with other opportunities. But if if you seek a higher salary, request a conversation about increasing your salary before giving notice. Don't use giving notice as a way to get a raise. This action can erode trust between you and your employer. It also sends the message that your job is only about the money. So ABZ Career Planning from the Startup of You is a great tool for planning your next move. So in this scenario, Plan A is your current job and organization. Plan B is what you will pivot to, a new opportunity. Sometimes you change to Plan B because A is not working, but sometimes A is working, yet Plan B appears to have more potential. The best Plan Bs will be different but related to what you're doing now, so that you can make use of past experience and continue growth. This plan will be more open-ended. Plan Z, on the other hand, will be more concrete. It will allow you to take on uncertainty and risk. Think of it as your safety net, your lifeboat, your fail-safe option. To build this plan, first identify how to measure when you're tracking toward a worst-case scenario. Then develop a plan that tells you what to do should that happen. That is your Plan Z. So now that we know ourselves better and have a better idea of what we're looking for, there's so many organizations out there. How do you find the right employer? We'll start with research. So first, consult your network. All of my jobs have been from network connections. Your network can be one of the greatest assets for your career growth. And events like this are perfect for growing your network. Be sure to attend social events. Even if you feel a little uncertain about it, consider finding yourself a networking mentor or someone you feel comfortable with, and know that they're going to include you in conversations and activities. Focus on human connections. Play games, have fun, build relationships. Who knows, you might learn about a new opportunity tonight. But also consider having a give first mentality. Think of ways you can help others. So then you can check job search channels. There are many websites. You can see who is hiring and what organizations are options for you. If you're looking specifically within the Drupal community, jobs@drupal.org is a good place to start. I've also used Indeed and Dice. There's also Monster.com and LinkedIn and many others. So once we find some potential organizations, how do we learn more about each organization and compare? In this scenario, if Dunder Mifflin is our Plan A, how do we know if Initech, Hooli, and Pied Piper, which one's going to be the right Plan B? And if you're not familiar with these companies, they're fake companies from TV shows and movies. So you can compare organizations on rating websites such as Glassdoor and Comparably. Be sure to look at the employee reviews, but note the posting dates and look for trends. I believe organizations, like people, can evolve when they decide to. So keep that in mind as you read the reviews. Visit organization websites. Find their organization values. Learn about their employee benefits. See if they have current job openings. Review their portfolio. Are you interested in working in similar projects that they've already worked on? Note their language. How do they talk about themselves? And I highly encourage you to apply and interview. Applying is not a commitment, it's an exploration. Don't doubt yourself. Apply if you have some of the qualifications. Let the interview process determine if you're going to be a good fit. And you can also gain feedback from the interview process that can help you identify gaps in your skill set. But remember to interview your potential employer as well. Think about the things you learn from personal reflection and use your personal values as tools for decision making. Ask questions that are going to give you more insight into how well the organization is aligned with your values. Contact current or former employees of the organization within your network. And if you aren't directly linked with former employees, look for shared connections you may have with these people and request an introduction. Also ask for specific examples to illustrate descriptions of the organization. But be sure to filter your research. Take a step back, take off the rose-colored glasses that make you see things better than they actually are. Consider individual bias and trust. Pay attention to language. Distinguish between work and play culture. And look for inconsistencies between your sources. So how do we collect and compare all of this information? A spreadsheet, of course. I'm surprised I didn't come up with this myself. This is an open source Google Sheet from a Twitter post by Joel Khalifa. The handle is not details. This was actually shared with me from Avi. This is next level. You can add your own criteria. You can add weights to each. You can score each organization and then compare the totals. I've typically used a whiteboard to just compare benefits and differences that are important to me. So now let's talk about evaluating the risk of a specific opportunity or offer. First, what is the worst case scenario, and is it tolerable or intolerable? Can you change or reverse the decision midway through? Is Plan B doable? Is there a specified long-term commitment? There are some opportunities that may require years of commitment. And also in my experience, agencies typically have like a 90-day check-in to see if things are working out. So that might allow for an early change if they aren't. Sometimes agencies also offer contract work prior to offering an official position as a way to test things out. And can you get to a new Plan B or Z relatively quickly? Remember that uncertainty does not equal risk. You will never be 100% certain. When an opportunity is uncertain, it doesn't mean it's risky. Some of the greatest opportunities have the most question marks. Consider age and stage. What will the risks be to you in a few years? Consider your hard assets and obligations. Different life situations will affect your ability to take on certain levels of risk. And remember that risk is personal. Go after opportunities that others may see as risky, but you don't. Be sure to evaluate all the benefits of a job and not just the salary. Experience, knowledge, connections can allow you to pivot into a wide range of Plan Bs. This opportunity could be a stepping stone to a bigger and better experience. And look for opportunities that have high short-term risk but low long-term risk. And seek to build your resilience with frequent contained risk-taking. If you're currently in a low-risk Plan A, experiment with risk in side projects, maybe even within the Drupal community. Find an initiative or a project that's promising and express interest in contributing. Think of risk-taking like a flu shot. You get a small contained dose of the flu, which makes you resilient against the flu. And this is a quote from, I believe, the Startup of You. If you don't find risk, risk will find you. The only long-term answer to risk is resilience. It sounds scary, but it's true. Safety is relative. For example, a government job is typically considered a low-risk job until the government shuts down for a month. The unexpected will happen, and resilience is your secret weapon. The 10-10-10 decision-making tool may also be helpful. How will you feel about this decision 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now? Waiting to make a decision can be good as well. It helps to avoid emotional decisions. That's why people sometimes say to sleep on it. But just beware of analysis paralysis. So now let's say we have an offer. Let's talk negotiation. I like this quote. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So salary negotiation is important. It's easier to increase your salary before you start than afterwards. Remember that salary growth builds throughout your career. If you don't negotiate, you could be leaving money on the table. Think of it as simply part of the process. But it's also important to express excitement and flexibility throughout the negotiation process. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, what are my career progression opportunities? Or, how is the salary decided? These are some great websites. They have tools to research potential counteroffers. Be sure to account for the organization's location, size, and industry, as well as factor in your experience, education, and performance. Also, search multiple sources because they each have their own unique set of filters, and the results will vary. So in addition to salary, think about negotiating your start date. Be sure to consider the fulfillment of obligations to your current employer. You can likely find these requirements in your employee agreement, contract, or handbook. If you can, take some time off between jobs. It'll allow you to start your new opportunity refreshed and energized. Again, be sure to express excitement and flexibility throughout the process. So if you're thinking about taking time off between jobs, these are some things to think about. In the US, health insurance. So if your insurance doesn't terminate immediately, request that your last day be in the beginning of a month, then request your start date to be at the end of the same month. Your employer may provide you with information about COBRA. COBRA allows you to purchase the same insurance you had with your employer. So in my last transition, I learned that COBRA has a retroactive grace period, which means that if my new job starts before the grace period ends, then I can potentially purchase the health insurance if I need it, and it will retroactively apply to my last date of employment. Also research or look at your financial assets and obligations. Ensure that you can pay your bills without a paycheck. So how do you fire your current employer? First, you give notice. You'll want to consult your employee agreement, contract, or handbook to know what the required notice period is. 2-week notice is most common, but it can range from a month to a week. And just be aware if your place of employment has legal requirements, such as the UK. This is my go-to resignation template. Not that I do this a lot. It includes a simple statement of resignation and notes the date of my last day. It also expresses a willingness to fulfill obligations, and it is thankful for the opportunities experienced with the organization. But before you press send or drop off your letter, be sure to manage your expectations of how your employer will react. Think about what typically happens when someone leaves your organization. This can range to a celebration with cake to being fired, which is not cool. For some, the standard protocol is that an employee is escorted out of the building by security. Just prepare yourself accordingly. Then we have to fulfill our obligations after we've given notice. When fulfilling your obligations, you may be asked to work with your manager to transition your work to others. You may be even asked to help hire your replacement. There could be opportunities to work beyond the notice period as a contractor until they hire your replacement. But just remember to build bridges, don't burn them. So you may find yourself working with them in the future. This is a photo of Mario Hernandez and myself. We work closely at Media Current, and now we are working together on a project. He is still at Media Current, and I am with Lullabot. So you never know what the future will hold. Just keep in mind that if an organization burns bridges, you can't control that. You can only control your behavior and your actions, and those are a reflection of who you are. And also be sure to give feedback. You may have an exit interview. If not, you can provide an exit letter. Just remember to be professional. Try to avoid emotionally charged responses. Also, give the organization data to improve. This could make things better for your coworkers or your replacement. And if problems aren't reported and documented, they're less likely to be resolved. So my final thoughts. Introspect regularly and allow yourself to evolve. Grow your network. It will be your greatest asset for career growth. Don't be afraid to apply and negotiate. Don't burn bridges. Build resilience by taking risk. And remember that success for you is also success for your organization. You aren't being selfish, it's a win-win. So I'm an avid audiobook listener, and these are some books that I've been listening to on this topic. Radical Candor is a great management-focused book. It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work is a great read. And I have some awesome stickers to give away if you'd like one. The Startup of You is a career-building book. And The Alliance is an organization-focused book that complements The Startup of You. And Tribal Leadership is also a great book. I'm also a podcast junkie. So there is a new season of Work Life with Adam Grant that I'm really excited about. Thrive Global has a podcast, but I also recommend following them on Facebook and Twitter. They have great articles about career building and burnout and all sorts of things. Yonder is a podcast focused on the challenges of remote organizations. Radical Candor is related to the Radical Candor book mentioned before. And Hurry Slowly is a podcast about avoiding burnout. So thank you, everyone, and happy career planning. Are there any questions or comments? I'm actually going to do that, so if you would like to anonymously ask a question, You can go to that address at the top of the slides. So yeah. Yes.
Do you have any opinions on just people transitioning to jobs too frequently? Sometimes I feel that in our community that's pretty common, and I've always wondered if it is like a side effect of our industry, or if maybe we need to be more patient, or just what the story is with that.
Right. I mean, I'm not a big fan of just leaving a job because the work is hard, or, I think, I did mention in the exit interview to give feedback because problems can't be solved without feedback, but it's good to also give feedback when you're an employee if you feel safe. It's, sometimes there's a problem you don't feel safe being honest and saying things like that. That might help, but it also, you could get some backlash. So, I mean, it's great to spend enough time that you can see the way things work and the patterns that are happening. So you don't want to just, jet at the first sign. You typically, but you also don't want to stay too long that the pattern ends up hitting you, which has happened to me before. So it's just, there's no right way answer to do it. Even if you're happy, there's nothing wrong with exploring other options and seeing what's out there. Because one of the things that I mentioned was sometimes you leave your plan A just because B has more potential. So it's your life. You only live once. You have to explore your options.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
If you're thinking about leaving your job, and you're like, say I'm in a position where I'm the most technical developer, and it would probably take a lot to get our other developers up to speed to be able to take on my work. Like, how would you like pre-plan that? I mean, and would you kind of like have to? Would you end up having to let your coworkers know, like, I'm thinking about leaving? Like, here, let me try to get you up to speed as quickly as I can. Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess in that. Okay, so the question was, if I'm the most technical person on the team and I'm thinking of leaving, how do I pass this information on you without giving away that I'm looking to leave? Is that essentially okay? I would say your initiative would be that you want to document your work. Like you would focus on documentation, and really it's just great for the scenario you get hit by a bus, right? You've heard that before. It's just good practice for you to not be the only person who knows all the things. And so documenting what you know and having that available and being able to maybe transition some of pieces of your work to other people to allow them to grow and learn and be a part of it as well, so that you're not burdened with that and that all the knowledge does not just live with you, because you just never know what can happen. So it wouldn't give away so much that you're leaving if it's about, I want this to survive if I don't. Because anything can happen, right? So.
What observations would you have on making remote work successful? It looked like, just from looking at where you work, there's a lot of people around the world. It's like, so what have you taken in as far as what makes people successful to be remote, especially those that are used to in person?
Right. I mean, sometimes, okay, so what makes remote work, essentially, for people? I would say you have to think about how much in-person connection and interaction do you need, because I know that it doesn't work for everyone. But in those cases, you can often find a co-working space, and that's your office. I think it's really important to establish an office wherever that is. But I mean, other people enjoy the flexibility, so it's really I had considerations of working for myself, and so I wanted to say, my first leap into agency and remote work was to see if I could work from home. Like, am I going to be doing the laundry or doing something else? Can I sit down and focus and do work at home? And so part of that for me was to establish an office, and the company that I worked for initially was very structured in work hours. And so it worked for me. It helped me to stay focused. I knew I needed to be at my desk at this hour, and I was going to leave at this hour, those sort of things. But then now I really like more flexibility to be able to say, you know what, I need to step away for a minute and walk my dog. So there's lots of different ways to work remote and different ways that companies, structure their work in that way as well. So it's, you just have to kind of test it out and see if it works for you. And some people find out in the first 90 days if an agency has a period, a grace period or whatever to test things out. You might find, this doesn't work for me. So maybe having that plan Z in place to know what you want to do next. Say I tested it out, it didn't work for me. That you can do that. All right. One more quick question.
I'm looking for some ideas when you're interviewing, how you get to know the company culture and managerial style, because I've found that people will say one thing, but then reality is a little bit different. Is there like some unique ways to find that out?
Right. I think having network connections and having maybe even... Oh, right. So ways to figure out how a company really is, if they may be representing themselves in one way and then they end up being a different company, basically. Being able to talk to a trusted contact that works there or has worked there, I think is better, just because you know the person and they know you, and maybe you can get a better sense of that. I don't know, my question that I've been thinking about is, asking either a current employee or the company, what happens when someone gets fired there? As sort of an indicator, sort of an abstract indicator of like what it's like to work at that company. Maybe you would get a true answer because it's so abstract and so, separate from what they might be expecting and be able to represent. You can maybe even get a facial expression like, So yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things. But I think that maybe the reviews, the review websites, and not all companies have reviews, so it's a little hard if they're smaller companies. But really trying to connect with someone who's worked there or works there is probably your best way, to get better information. All right, thank you very much.